welcome to your favorite YouTube channel, Cartoonist Kayfabe. My name is Ed Piskor.
I'm Jim Rugg.
Jimmy, shoot interview guest today, underneath the hot lights, is the great Kelley Jones. Uncle Kelley Jones, I like to call him, man.
Uncle Cal. Yeah.
Give us,
Uncle Cal.
Give us some of that bibliography so that we could jump right into the conversation, Jimmy.
Deadman, Sandman, Batman, Alien Hives, Batman Dark Joker, Hammer, 13th Son, Conan, Swamp Thing, Lobo versus Roadrunner. We could spend this entire interview reading this list. Like, what a career Kelley has had. Very excited to get into some details here.
The one title that was left off of this fantastic list, Uncle Kel, was Terraformers, Wonder Color Comics.
Yep.
Where does that lie in your career, before or after Micronauts?
It was during that part, and I live in Sacramento, and there was a real strong comic book creative culture here. Ron Lim, Sam Keith, Tim Vigil. There was a lot of us here, and we were out in, Tatooine as far as it was. We're way away from the centers of comics and anything happening. And we had some friends who were putting together some books, and they had found through, I think, Roger McKenzie and some other guys had put this little publishing thing together. So on the side, I would do my Marvel stuff, and on the side, I would work with these guys because they were just old friends, They were buddies that I had, the comic shop guys, your comic book friends when it was, not cool. And you guys, we would just all get together, and we went to this pizza joint all the time. And I had gotten in around 82. So I was already doing it. And much to my surprise, because I really didn't know what the hell I was doing when they hired me. It was just, as an inker. And Marvel had transformed me into a penciler because they weren't liking the pencil samples after Butch Geist left Micronauts. And I thought I was done. I was that naive. I thought, well, no, off to go to college again, or whatever. And the editor said, you want to do it. So I started doing it. But I still maintained this friendship with all, even though you're working all the time, those are the people I like to hang out with. And so when they brought this forward, I said, hey, count me in, I'll do it. And I got to meet Roger McKenzie out of it, who I was a big fan of his writing. And I always kind of liked it afterwards. I forgot all about it until, you go to a show and someone brings it up to you. It's always that they probably think they're going to embarrass you, but it brought back great memories.
Here's a question that sort of you make spring to mind, being Sacramento dude. Are your deadlines for New York-based Marvel Comics, are your deadlines stricter because of FedEx and things? Like, how does that part work?
I used to, where I really felt it was when they by simple chance, they put me on the covers for Batman and Detective. And that was a very hectic period because they were trying to arrange all these books to be together. And a lot of times they didn't know they know they needed it for solicitation, but they hadn't cleared what they were going to do. So I honestly, I would be called Monday morning for something that they needed, sometimes the next day, sometimes Wednesday, because they tried not to cut me that short. So I was just making it up as I went. And fear is a great thing to make you just cut all the crap and get right to the core of it. All I used to do is say composition first. I have to come up with a cool composition. Next, get to the point of whatever it is. And where it probably worked out is I was such a horror guy that I could pinpoint a dramatic or frightening shot, which works well for a cover. I used to tell them, don't give me those guys posing shot. I don't want to do posing or a group of guys or they're all coming at you. I don't want that. When they were able to tell me what was going on, I said, I don't want to know too much. Just give me tell me something quick, because there wasn't time. Thank God. I used to refuse to get a fax machine. I wanted no one to see what I was doing. I wanted no one to know where I was at. I didn't want anyone to know my speed. Because sometimes you just want to work free of all the any imperial entanglements, So and they were benefiting from it at that time. Now for me, I was just I was unaware of any of the effects of that, but how well that was going. But man, I thank God every day I was in that deadline hell from being in California to New York. I looked at it as like, okay, today I got to come up with something. And it was frightening. But then once you're about 10 minutes at the board and the idea comes, it's fine. And then I would look and I go, 3:00, that was the cutoff. I had to package it and get it to them. They didn't come pick it up. So I had to drive into town. And so I knew if I started at 8, it had to be done at 10. It forced me to buy a big copier so I could make big, nice copies in case it got lost. So I have a huge history of my work in pencils, and I just made them and put them in a box and forgot about it. But I thank God every day for I put personal deadlines on myself. Whatever it's going to be, it's got to be that day. A page that takes longer than a day is not going to do me any good. I don't think as well if I'm spending too much time on it.
Man, I feel like we could unpack that answer for the rest of this talk. Where to begin? You mentioned doing a page in a day. I think your page layouts and storytelling are really strong and impressive. You're such a stylist. It's the first thing I assume everybody sees when they look at your work. But reading your work, I'm impressed by the actual storytelling is like very solid. And I think of you as, 90s, maybe late 80s, a time whenever solid storytelling wasn't necessarily celebrated.
I was very aware of what was going on around me. I was not aware of what I was doing that way. I didn't think of myself as being different. I thought of myself as I didn't want to compete with the time I was in. It wasn't like I'm dismissive. I just didn't get it. So I wanted to compete. Like, what if I was trying to get a job in 68 to 72 or in that period? Those guys, because I looked at what they were doing and they were wonderful. So I knew that people perceived me, and probably rightly so, as kind of an artsy-fartsy, transgressive dude. But I was a very blue-collar, transgressive, artsy-fartsy dude. I wanted production. I knew I only would get better if I had to do it. And I had to, with a gun to my head or otherwise. That's the only way you get better. So I didn't really look at too much, but when I did, it was all very homogenous to me. And it was all very... the storytelling was more about what the artist didn't want to draw.
Right.
And to me, I used to tell Doug or anyone I worked with, if you for 1 second write to my strengths, I'm going to go nuts. Just write a story. I'll figure it out. That's the only way you get any good, is if somebody gives you something you don't want to do, make it cool.
I'm so glad.
Great.
Yeah, I'm so glad you said those exact words, because one of the things that I talk about on the channel often, I describe certain artists as drawing what I call pathologically cool. And what I mean by that is sort of what you're describing. Like, if it's this chair I'm sitting on, there are artists who can figure out a way to create some curves and something to make it extremely interesting to look at. Yeah. And I think of you very, very highly on that list of people who could just, you could take anything and you figure out a way to distort it or add your spin to whatever it is, whatever background details, whatever.
Well, I didn't learn to draw by taking art courses, and I didn't learn to draw by reading comics. I loved comics. So I consider myself an outsider fan to this day. I do not know how and where I mean, I did what I did and stuff happened, but you'd have to ask the people who hired me, because I have no damn idea why they did. But where I learned was I took a lot of film courses. I was a huge film nut. So,
Cartoonist Kayfabe is brought to you by The Books That We Make. Out now. Hip Hop Family Tree Omnibus. Thank you guys so much for supporting it. And if you did not, we still have some copies available. There are 2 rounds of Red Room that are out there. Antisocial Network and Trigger Warnings. Crypto Killers, the 3rd in the set, is coming out in 2024 in January. And X-Men Grand Design Trilogy trade paperback is coming to you in November. Another thing that's coming to you in November is the Street Angel Princess of Poverty collection that is the companion piece to Street Angel Deadliest Girl Alive. Jimmy's been self-publishing over the course of this past year, the BW Zine 1986 zine and True Crime Funnies. And of course, Hulk Grand Design is out there on the stands, but not for long. Now that we are done paying the bills, back to the video.
Film doesn't really, people think it totally translates to comics. It sort of does, but it really doesn't. But I loved it because it gave me, I wanted an ambiguousness in my stuff. I don't want everything. I want the storytelling there, but then I want those images where you go, pause for a moment, or it's a different angle. I was delighted by stuff that other artists at the time weren't. They would love a big guy jumping at you or a guy yelling at you. Mine was somebody's got to plug, I had the scene in a Batman where this guy was going to electrocute another dude and he had to plug in the thing to electrocute him. And I went, well, how do I do that with tension? How do I do that to make people slow down? And so I sat there and it's why production's great, where you're under it. And all of a sudden it hit me. The shot is from inside the electrical plug-in, right? So you're just looking through these two slots and it stopped you. Well, what is that? But you see the guy coming with the prongs, so you know that's what it is. That's not a superhero trope. That's a horror film trope, And that's not that was the thing I was most happy with. Where it's cool is I heard from so many other artists after that came out, wow, that stopped them, and then they realized and it all worked. But they were looking at it, Now, to me, that was one panel in a oversized issue of Batman, but it made my day. Just like every once in a while, you just want to work it. You just want to say, come up with something. I never thought of myself as transgressive. I just started hearing that from years later from other artists who would look at the stuff or say, well, if he can do it, I can do it. Or if he's going off and doing that. And I never thought of myself that way. I always thought of myself as just goddamn lucky that they weren't. Every month I thought they're going to fire me over this, but I couldn't stop doing it. And I grew up knowing Sam Keith, and he was doing what he was doing and I was doing what I were doing. We used to sit in my kitchen and draw, and we would just go, can you believe they have not these editors are going for it. And Sam once said, well, because it's selling. Right. They don't understand it, but for whatever reason, it's selling. He says, so I'm grateful. And I went, I guess that's true.
So you're close to Sam. He goes off to Image and really, spends a big chunk of his time there doing Max. Did you have any interest in doing that, like doing a creator-owned book, going in that direction?
Well, I never thought I would get to be in comics. I didn't think I'd get to be at either of the big two. And Batman was the New York Yankees of comic books to me. So for whatever happened, I got the plumbest plum in the whole thing. And I knew that every artist, if you want to be remembered, your headstone is your work. It's not, that's what it is. It ain't some tombstone somewhere. And I thought, 100 years from now, Batman will be, it's like baseball. I mean, they still care about games 100 years ago. I figured I'll stick with that. I had the good fortune of having people who I really admired who had done it come up and say, you're doing a really good. Neil Adams knocked me out saying, if I'm the 70s, you're the 90s. And he said he really dug it. And he started explaining to some other people that were like kind of, civilians, that was remarkable. That you don't expect. You just sit there and go, I was terrified because here's this guy who is Batman. I mean, he just was. But, and I didn't even want to tell him that the guy who really got me to want to draw it was Marshall Rogers. I mean, that's the guy who got me going. And that was because I was a huge fan of his, and he looks so different, And when I got there, I was lucky to be around people who, Archie Goodwin and Denny O'Neil, who would just say, they didn't say, you're doing great. They would say, why are you doing this? And it's one of those questions that's open-ended. It can mean anything. What they wanted was to know, was I committed to this, or was I trying to just be a hipster dude?
Right.
And I didn't know what hipster dudes were because I was still thinking 1972. It's like, but when stuff, at that time, I looked so different. They put out, I remember there was this thing about they wanted everyone to really kind of take a stock in what they were doing and see, except me. They just let me be alone, And I knew some other artists were getting upset saying, well, how come Kelley gets to be alone? And I was out here, so I had no connection with these people, and I didn't want them to think, well, I'm sitting there telling them what I'm going to do. I just the, Doug would write it, Denny would love it. It would happen, and I all I ever heard after I would give my answers on why I drew the way I did or why I did a character the way I did was they go, okay, you're thinking about it. You're not trying to just. I think what also helped me was, like I said, I didn't tell the writers what to write. I just said write it, and I don't want big booga booga shots. Just give me a story, and I'll let me pace it. Let me figure out how to do it. That's my angle. I used to love to put designs in Batman, little beginning shots, little ending shots, chapter breaks, and all that, because I was trying to do the 40s. It wasn't like I invented this, but I loved a decorated book. It felt like you got more.
So I'm interested in how you would approach like your page layouts if you were doing thumbnails or something like that. But now that you mentioned like the scripts, was it almost Marvel method that you were able to like paste the stories or break them
A
down
lot of it
yourself?
was a lot of it was Doug would and I would talk about it, and then he would write, you know, primarily I said, give me the emphasized dialogue, work on that, and then kind of tell me where they're at. But when I'm laying out a page, the first thing I do is do the last panel because that's the one that turns it. So I wanted whatever it was going to be dramatic or important, and it make you go. And so I still do that to this day. Um, I will read a script and I'll mark it up to where I think where things will go. A lot of times writers can't read me because what they think is a big panel is not a big panel to me. It's a regular panel. What's a big panel to me might be something that they would never figure. But I think it gives their stories a better emphasis. It's like doing italics when you write, it emphasizes a word. That's what I'm trying to do is give several panels in a book some kind of emphasis. Um, there's times like right now I'm working on doing really clean graphic rough work. I want it still very graphic, but I want it a little rougher on to fit the story I'm doing. When I'm doing Dracula, I want uh I want all the things I loved, and I don't mean what I watched or saw, but all the things I loved that made a comic book great. I want them again, and it's impossible to do four color printing anymore, so I have to imitate it. I want primary colors. I want heavy textures that you can see what they are, and the colors, and really none of the airbrushy effects, none of the flares, none of that stuff. I think people naturally gravitate to that graphic nature of a comic. The lines are rhythmic. The spotting of blacks, a really good composition. They don't need all the other stuff. And I think the other stuff is to hide that they don't do it,
Oh,
or
absolutely.
that they don't think that way.
Let me ask a Sacramento related question because you named some
Hmm.
names, but I do wonder if you had any interactions with any of the madmen of Sacramento. I'm thinking Tim Vigil. I'm thinking
Yeah.
Chris Silver of Silverwolf Graphics.
Yes.
Did those guys ever approach you? Were
So,
you?
well, not really approaching me, but I knew them. And you got to remember, I started around 18 or 19. I just out of the gate, I did not know that was going to happen. I sent stuff in thinking they'd tell me, "What do you think? Here's what you're doing wrong, or here's
Right.
what you need to work on." And I sent it to DC too. So on the day they hired me, in the morning I got the mail, and Ernie Cohen said, "No, you have this wrong, this wrong, this wrong. I can see something there, but you have these things wrong." And that was my first time, not as a disappointment that like, oh, I got to think about this because Marshall Rogers had told me, I think you could do this now. And I was like 16 or 17 then. I was really, I wasn't, it was because of him that I sent stuff in. But later that day, I get a thing from Marvel saying, we want to hire you as the inker on for Butch Guys. He really likes your work. Ralph Macchio was the editor, really like your work. We're going to send some stuff to you next. It was on Halloween of 82 or something. And I remember being so excited, and then the reality of what it was hit me. Like then my heart, I just sunk. So I started that early, and then I think it shocked all the people you're talking about. I mean, here we're all just sort of drawing on placemats at the pizza joint, or we're talking movies and comics and stuff. And all of a sudden I had to tell him I was doing this, and getting published. And all my the guys who ran the comic book stores, it was like, not like they said, "Oh, you can't do it." They were just shocked. At first they all thought I was bullshitting. And I had to bring, the little note that Ralph wrote me, and then I showed him Butch's pages when they came. But so I knew all these guys, and so when they were actually creating a lot of cool stuff, I was already in the grind at Marvel. And they probably were shocked as I was. I was like going, dudes, I don't know. This is amazing. And what happened was it got to the point to where the influence of that community was one of the factors, not the main one, but it was one of the factors why I went from Marvel to DC. I wanted more freedom. I was making a lot of money, but under contract, and the contracts, I never signed one again because you're stuck.
Right.
You all of a sudden security's the last thing an artist needs. Absolute last thing. The only security you need is to know that you want to do it the next day, and never care how the book turns out. I mean, turn it what you do, but how fans react, because these things have a long lifespan, and it might be that they don't get it now, but they'll get it later.
So fascinating to think about that Sacramento pedigree, because there are through lines. Bernie Wrightson comes to mind when I look at your work, obviously, like Vigil, Sam Keith to some extent.
Well, what we had here, and this isn't usually spoken about, what we had here was a chain of comic book stores called Comics and Comics, where Bud Plant was this secret partner. So it wasn't like a regular comic book shop. You go in there, it'd be original Jeff Jones art on the wall.
Wow.
There would be original Wrightson stuff on the wall. There would be Barry Windsor Smith and Neil Adams, because Bud could go get that stuff. He would send the guys I know, all my comic book shop guys who ran it, the managers there, they would go back east. They went to the studio when it was all those guys for that 2 years and did a big buy. I was buying a look back. They were able to get copies of this stuff. And I have, on my wall over here, I have all these original Christopher Enterprise posters that Wrightson had done signed. But I got them at the time. There's only 100, and I got one. But it was because of Bud Plant. So we all saw this. We congregated, and so they were art heavy. That you had underground guys. Robert Crumb would come up and buy. So we got to see everything. We saw underground, we saw mainstream, we saw European. Bud could get it all. And Bud was really good at pushing everything. And so these guys would let me sit in the back room and just read and read and read. That's how I discovered EC Comics. I came in there as some kid saying, "Oh, this whoever artist is the best guy in the world." And they said, "No, come here." And sat me down and let me read Wally Wood stuff from EC. Al Williamson, Frazetta, all these guys are comics. And I came out of there very chastised and realizing, but it influenced my inking a huge amount when I saw Wally Wood. I owe those guys. So it is, I have to say, it's why I miss that kind of culture in a comic book shop.
We say it all the time because we have a really good comic scene here in Pittsburgh, with shops that go back to the 70s, and it's like you can take it for granted if that's what you grow up around, but a lot of places don't have anything like that. Nothing.
And I think that you can see it affect comic book creators if you can see isolated and just imitating what you like, or you can see being influenced by others. And I used to be Sam Keith and I used to really be influenced by each other. I'd do something he'd like, he'd do something I like. And we were very simpatico on a lot of things. He got very influenced by the kind of inking and undergrounds to establish light effects, and I became very influenced by EC Comics on how to do lighting effects. But lighting was the big thing. We wouldn't talk about light. We didn't talk about figure drawing and all that crap. We talked about how do you get and establish something with light? How do you what kind of line work works best to do that? When do you get rough? When do you get clear? I remember Sam saying that he came and he saw something I was doing and he liked the inking on a lot. And he says, and he did a great question. He says, "How did you come to this?" And I said, "Well, I didn't want the lines all perfect anymore. So I started breaking them up and let some feathering lines long, some small, but they all mushed into the black, right? It was the light into the black into the light. And he goes, yes, because he had just come to that same conclusion of not trying to be Rudy Nebrez, but try to be, you know, Jackson or Spain or Crumb kind of line work. And so probably that's why we both came in at the same time, kind of happened at the same time, him at Marvel, me at DC, being throwbacks, but we didn't know we were throwbacks. And the people we were working with, the editors and stuff, they knew this stuff. They knew those guys who were doing it. So, I mean, far better than me. So I think that really fueled it. Sacramento and Bud Plant and those comic book stores is the reason it happened. We would go down to the Bay Area. It was wild down there then. And it was pure comics, the best stores, the best shops. It was just everywhere. It was in the air. I used to go down there and there were the best bookstores. There was a poster shop that was just, I miss it to this day, movie poster shop. It was everything, and it was all the cool stuff, and we were a subculture. We didn't know we were subculture. It's like bowlers are a subculture, and there's this thing. There's our own language. There's our own ebb and flow things that turn us on. It's so much so that I used to have to tell girlfriends at the time what I meant by certain language or what we were talking about because they wouldn't have no clue. It would be bizarre. And the things we'd get excited about were never the things that everyone else got excited about, Never.
That's the basis of the channel, man. And there are often times, because we do have a lot of makers in the audience, but a lot of civilians come through or just fans. So when it comes to the language, and we're looking at, say, Jaime Hernandez pages or something, and we're talking about spotting blacks, we have to explain what that is, man.
Yes.
Got to explain to the average viewer.
I had a great period. I was doing a book. I think it was Dark Joker or something. And that wasn't written for me. It was written for someone else who bailed on it. And then they said, "Can you come in and do it?" And they delayed what I was going to do. So if I would do it. And at that point I said, sure. I read it. It was terrific. It was a lot of fun. It was very different for me. But what happened was it was late because the guy bailed on him and waited before he ghosted him. And that was the end of it. So I took it and I penciled my ass off. And at one point they said, can you come in? John Beatty had wanted to work with me. We had done a thing that never got published for Archie called The Hangman. And it was beautiful. And the publisher saw it and said, no way are we publishing this. And okay. But it established me a connection to John, who was an ace inker at the time. I mean, all the greats were calling for him, Byrne and Golden and Ordway, everybody. Zach. So I was flattered as hell that he wanted to work with me. And that was the first pro that did. So what I loved was at a time he was getting later and later. DC flew me out to Florida where he lived, and we just sat there and for 10 days just jammed. His board, he got me a board. We just sat and talked and inked all day. And we made the deadline. Through that time, this long story gets to the point, was he taught me terms, right? Because he was such a professional artist. He had worked with all the greats. And he would say, you got to be careful with this zipatone because you don't want some moire. And I go, what moire? Is that the eel or what? And he goes, no, how it'll make these weird patterns that you're not intending. He used to throw stuff at me all the time. And I felt like such a moron. I came back and my wife says, so how was it? I go, man, I should have went to school because I was learning terms. I use my own colloquialisms, my own. But then what I would do to John was scare the shit out of him because he said, you work without a net. He's all very, and I would go, oh, I'm not getting this cloud I want. So I dip my finger in ink and just go bang, 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 bang. And then I get it. He goes, ah, what are you doing? And I go, whatever makes the page looks good in print, John, that's what I'm doing. And I went and I said, do we have time to go to the store? He says, no, not right now. We got to get this thing. All right, fine. So I just went and got my toothbrush, and I'm doing toothbrush stuff. Now, he knew about it, but he'd never seen it done. And I'm not really frisketing and forming. I'm just, and then I'll white out what I needed. He's like, God, no, what are you, but at the end he says, I like your results. I like it. I said, Sam Keith and I told him, I said, Sam Keith and I used to know that when our pages were done, they were thick because we just kept going over it and over it. And and that kind of bravery, when you're attacking the stuff, just thinking how it looks in the printed page. I don't care what it is on my board. But I remember Sam just couldn't get this panel right. It looked great to me, but okay. He couldn't get it, and he would do it again, and he would do it again, and it was getting, finally says, enough of this shit. And he says, do you have a pair of scissors? And he just cut it out of the page. He just cut it out, drew something else, pasted it in, and I went, that looks really great. The son of a bitch threw that. I wanted to keep what he cut out, but he chucked it really quick, and I know it's gone. He tore it up or whatever. Sam's a great emotional artist, but he's very controlled. I'm an emotional artist, and that's probably why we got along, because it would be this explosion of it. I mean, we really dug the life of making these things, to the exclusion of all else. And we were the only ones seeing it, right? It wasn't like we thought everybody's going to see it, or now they tell you to post stuff and get a reaction. I'm terrible at shilling. I'm really good, though, at being a fan. That's what I do. And that's what Sam was. We would talk about the people we liked and stuff we loved, and those were good days. Salami pizza in my kitchen inking was a great period.
That sounds amazing.
I love those ideas. I mean, it's like iron sharpens iron, and I think about, like, that's an approach. And we got the Pittsburgh crew here, and you could see some through lines and things. But then I think about, like, these remote geniuses, like a Richard Corbin, who's like an alchemist with his color and all that stuff, kind of creating his whole own thing with zero, like in Kansas or something, like in the middle of nowhere.
I think what happens is people, how you get somewhere is a weird thing anyway. And I think then, with Richard, we used to separate the wheat from the chaff. The people who thought he was cool, they were cool. The people who didn't get it, all right, go enjoy we knew they'd be out of comics anyway, because they would read a little bit and then they get bored and move on. But we all wanted it. Where my wife is a civilian, but where she became a fan, I'm doing this for years, she could care less. She sees the Den segment in Heavy Metal and says, that's really good. I said, well, if you really like that, let me show you something. She becomes a huge Den fan, right? Huge Richard Corbin fan, buys everything he has for herself because it's in my studio, or I have it in my bookshelf. She wanted her own. And I felt really bad when he passed away, because I said, one of these days he'll be, so I'm going to get him to sign. I got Milo Manaro to sign a bunch of stuff for her, because she loved him too. So she starts with this avant-garde, which I can't keep up with. I'm like going, okay, I'm with you for all these years, and now you're getting it, but you go right to the cream of the crop, And but it's good, because those guys speak, man. It is so personal. Richard Corbin is so personal that he's doing this for himself.
Absolutely.
We just happen to be, he's letting us peek over his shoulder. That's a genius too. That's a brave man. Didn't care.
Did you ever meet Richard?
No, we spoke over the computer. I had told him how much he had changed up his style on something, and I really liked it. He went really high contrast on some stuff. And I told him, I said, you pick every line you choose is correct. There's no mistaking it. And I said, that's the work of a master. Just perfect.
When he got that presidency thing for Angoulême, and he didn't go to France, I don't think, but he did a little video, and you can find that on YouTube. And they kind of glance by, and they show all of his sculpture that he uses for Den and to light his figures and stuff. And the sculptures look like his drawings. It's pretty cool. But listen,
I think that's what he probably wanted to be first, right?
An animation he would talk about, like just a Renaissance guy. But we we want to promote that Dracula comic that I've been hearing about a little bit online.
A little bit.
And we brought Uncle Matt
Well, you've
Wagner.
seen it, right? You guys have seen it?
Read it,
Yes.
loved it. We have Uncle Matt Wagner in the house. So,
Uncle Matt!
So now is the part where I could pull both your pants down and just start sucking you guys off because it is incredible. Kelley, the art that you're bringing to the presentation. When I was talking to Jimmy about this off cam, it's like, and please do not take this in the wrong way whatsoever, but it's like when Tony Hawk was 40 years old doing the 900 and teaching all the fucking kids, check this out, man. I am here. I'm still a fucking badass.
Yep.
And
I think Kelley will take that one.
I think
I'll take it.
I think.
Well,
I
look.
think masterpiece is not a word that we use lightly around here, and I think you guys you're doing what you're supposed to, and it is incredible to watch.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I think like I told you earlier, I compete with 1972, 73, 74, and Matt gave me that. He gave me this. It felt like heavy metal. It felt like doing. I mean, he said that once, but it felt like I was getting that kind of a raw, powerful, visceral thing with a literary edge, and I don't think we've seen that in a very long time. And I say that from reading the script. I knew when I got it that this was. He told me on the phone, it knocked me out. But when I got it, it was like fully formed, and it was. I love a script I get, and they're rare to get, where you know any monkey could draw it and would be awesome. Okay, you know it when you got it. I love a script that intimidates me because it's obviously demanding me, not by details and the emotion, the power of it. And I'm not I wanted to make sure everything he did, all the beats he had, this power that was in it was there. And he did something cool because Dracula, we all know Dracula. What are you going to do? And you read this, and I'm going, this is utterly original. I've not read this Dracula. I've not seen this Dracula. And it feels more Dracula than anything I've seen in a long, long time.
You guys, Kelley said any monkey could draw that script. Okay, maybe so. But the entire time I'm writing it to Kelley's strengths. And I'm thinking to myself, oh, God, Kelley's going to draw the fucking shit out of this. And then the art would come back, and it's like way better than I expected, even. So it was just an absolute joy in every.
I think it's like we always work together. That's what it is.
It literally felt like. I mean, we've known each other for decades.
Yes.
Doing this, it felt like we were still working together.
No, and I think it's one of those very natural, finishing each other's sentences creatively. That's how it felt.
Very few great collaborations where everybody, to a man or woman, is in sync with everybody else. And I put this up there, down to Jose's color, and it's been a long time since we had a collaborative
Matt gets
comic
credit.
like
Matt, that's where Matt's artistic eye comes in, because Matt had clearly said what kind of colors he wanted on me. And he told me, I said, okay, I hope I can get that. I've tried, and it's very hard to get, and I can get close to it,
you guys, what he's talking about there is, I mean, as long as I've loved Kelley's art, I've always been just entirely disappointed with the way people color him. Because, Kelley's got this incredible atmospheric mood to his work, and everybody's like, oh, he's dark and spooky. I'm going to color it dark and spooky. And my attitude is always like, no, he's already got that there. You don't need to add anything to it. So his stuff should be colored vibrantly, and so we see all the shadows, and so when Jose came on board, and of course Jose, we immediately thought of him because of the restoration work he's recently been doing on Rights and Swamp Thing, and also on the restoration work he's been doing on Corbin. You guys were talking about Corbin when I came on screen here, and I explained this to Jose, and I said, look, we're looking for something like Italian giallo films, specifically something like Dario Argento's Suspiria, or very specifically Mario Bava's Black Sabbath, both of which are lit up like neon pinball machines, and they're spooky as shit, Yeah. And boy, he got that. He totally got that vibe and ran with it, and it's so beautiful.
Yeah. I have to say, that where I was ready to give notes. I every time I'd see it, his stuff come in, I had no notes. Matt would give detailed little things, maybe a thing here, maybe a thing there for storytelling purposes, but the choices were all there. If nothing, if they just were as they were, I was in heaven. But that's where sometimes I need Matt's eye, because I'm such a fan first, and Matt's, you can see my background, fanboy, Matt's professional comics creator, you know. So
I always say my role in the team is I'm the storytelling bitch. I'm the guy that's always like, wait a minute, 2 panels ago that nope, we gotta.
Matt has this. When they finally take his brain out, they'll find a big part of it was an editor in there. There's a little editor fold in the brain, because he has a great, as you're in the moment, editing eye. And I let my strength and my weakness is I'm emotional when I'm doing it, and sometimes I'll miss it. And Matt would say, "Hey, that's great." No, but he would tell me why, and I would go, "Yeah, that's better." And when it was done, I go, "That's better." So that I trust him with telling the story. I trust him, and his artistic sense was Jose. I mean, that right there. And I looked at the first batch that came in, and no special effects, just a guy's talent, just his choices of color. And I went, man, that is a long time since I've seen that.
It is very exciting to see that color approach on your artwork.
It's shot every sequence. Matt writes in sequences. So if you know it now, there's this sequence leads to that sequence leads to the next sequence. And Jose would bring this vibrancy to each sequence. So it wasn't just this same monolithic, homogenized coloring. He would move with Matt the way Matt moved with the writing. He would move with the atmosphere of the situation. So when you're in the battlefield, it's wild. When you're in the mystical forest, it goes all greens and very, very supernatural looking, but bright. Everything he did was bright. And it made the weird thing, it made the book darker, because you could see all my inks. You could see everything Matt had said.
That's the key. You gotta you have such finesse and such eloquence in your inks. It's like, oh God, I hate it when somebody would put dark colors on it and they just clot up, and now you can see your inks, and it's just remarkable. We were talking there about the me being the storytelling bitch. Here's the level of communication that Kelley and I enjoy. We redid that first page, which turned out being just beautifully iconic. We redid it 3 times.
Yep. Because
Kel went off my description from the script the first time, and I was like, and tried something else. I was like, But I sent him just a little scribble. I was like, maybe something like this. And boy, he just took that and shot it literally to the moon.
What Matt did is something that Doug Mensch had once explained to me, that the first page of a comic, if it's a Batman should be on it, because he was telling on some other guys they weren't. But you're dealing with that. So when Matt was saying it, he wasn't having to explain some brand new thought. It was like, he's right. First page has to be this thing. And certainly the others were serviceable. They would have been, but never as good as that. I kept them as, I'd not like I'd ever get rid of it, but I kept them as a reminder,
of process.
Right, it is. And and Matt's probably lucky too that my big hero is Stanley Kubrick, who says, you either want it, do you want it right or not at all? Do you care or do you not? Right. So everyone would have to go and work and work and work and work. But
dude, I'm not going to make you draw stuff 127 times. Don't worry.
He won't do that. But I have a big poster of Stanley over my head while I'm working. And when I do that, and I'm starting to feel, I look up and I think that's why I love his stuff. And I think it comes to trust. If you're lucky enough, the team we have in place is, I agree, wonderful. And I think we all trust each other. It's as simple as that.
How does that team come together? Did you guys get together, want to work together, and then come up with this project? Or Matt, did you have this project mapped out and then find people? How do you guys get together on this?
Kelley and I met many, many years ago when we were both contributing to the Seasons of Mist story arc in Sandman. It was first at a con and then at a couple store signings, and we just kind of hit it off immediately because we both have a love for horror fiction in all its many forms, and we have a common sense of humor. It just everything clicked.
Bourbon.
There, that too. And we'd always intended to do something significant over the years, but your individual lives, your individual careers kind of push you in different directions, and the time was never right. And year and a half, 2 years ago, I had posted something on Facebook, and Kelley contacted me with that same old echo of, we really got to do something together someday.
Yeah.
But at this point, I'd been stewing on this Dracula stuff for enough years, and I finally had what I thought was my take on it. And so I contacted him and said, "Are you serious, man? Because I got what I think is the perfect thing for us that will be, like a real sublime collaboration. But it's going to take a commitment of years. We have mapped out to do 4 of these graphic novels, so we're looking at 4 to 5 years worth of commitment." And he said, "Well, let me hear what you got." And I said, "All right, let me get all my thoughts in presentable order," and called him shortly after that, and we chatted through it first, and you can take it from there, Kel.
And so at that point, when we were starting to put it together, lettering wise, I'd been working with Rob Lee, and Rob was brilliant on me. I'm an overdrawer. I get involved, and I have to make that panel look good for me, and then let everyone else try to pound it into where do we, the writer has to figure out what do I cut something, whatever. Rob knew where to place balloons.
Rob, actually, I think we had settled on Rob before Jose.
Oh yeah, long before.
Yeah.
And I was saying how much I admired. Rob really likes good art, and he's a natural proofreader. So I learned that with him beforehand. He could spot things ahead of time. And so he would place things so beautifully, and then I just loved when he would letter, it was beautiful, and then his special effects were great. And at that point I went, okay, this is the guy I always want to work with, because he's saving my butt a lot of times with my overdrawing. So I told Matt about that. Matt checked him out and said, yeah, okay. When the coloring came to it, we didn't really know, but Matt had this philosophy. So Matt was looking around, and when he mentioned Jose, it was like, wow, if we can get him, we'll give him a shot. Well, Jose jumped at it. He saw the art, and he jumped.
Yeah, like right away. I contacted Jose, and I said, "Hey, man, I want to talk to you about something." And he said, "What?" And I told him, and he's like, "Yes."
Yeah. He got a hold of me and said, "This is like, what I've always kind of wanted. This is the stuff I always wanted." And
we knew Jose wouldn't overcolor it,
No.
I mean, there's a few instances of some computer-ishness to it, but it's just not overcolored like a lot of when I look at contemporary comics. I know you guys dig the old school of coloring techniques and coloring theory, and boy, Jose just really brought that to the table.
I like to say it's classic.
Mm-hmm.
I know I don't care about the terms. Old school's fine, but I like classic because I know that Jose looked at it and he saw that really cool 70s vibe, and that's what he told me. This looks like that, but it's brand new. He says, I want to be with something like this. So he asked me things. I didn't want to influence him too much. So I just stuck to what Matt was saying. Bright, look at this stuff. And let's see what you do. You're not, I told him a few times, you're not a one and done guy. If the philosophy's there, but we need to, fine. But don't worry that you got to hit it right out of the park. We're figuring it out too. Mm-hmm. And, I had told him, I said, since no one's going to do what we're doing, since no one's doing what we're doing right now, it will look brand new. Mm-hmm. It will shock people, I think. You hope. And then when I first saw the stuff come in, I told Matt, this is absolutely exceeding our dreams on this. What our plan?
Talked to Jose at Baltimore, I don't know, a month ago maybe or something, and he was very excited about the book and was describing certain parts, that we've now seen.
Well, Jose gets to be an artist.
See it.
Yeah, he gets to be an artist. That's really what it is. His contribution is every bit as important because he's not supporting me or fixing me. He's reading it and wanting to get the same thing in there. You can see it.
I think that's the same for all of you because Kelley, you talked about like having no safety net. You guys don't have an editor looking over you.
Well, we do. We do.
Let's talk a little bit about the process of this thing. Now, there's a Kickstarter in place right now. It's going to be going on for a little while, but Jimmy and I read the book, so this is not that vaporware kind of comic project where the first book is done.
Yeah.
Presumably done on spec for for
It
this,
was absolutely
this.
And not only that, we're about halfway through the second one.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is a great point because like you guys have giant track records. I assume we could probably name a dozen publishers that would have given you advances, given you money for this already. Why do this on your own? What prompted that direction?
They'd have told Matt no. They'd have said, "No, Matt, that's great, but you're going too far." Or Matt, you know that I wanted nothing encumbering me. And sometimes you want to remind yourself, "Am I an artist or not?" Not a comic book guy making money. I wanted to be an artist, and
I'm not so much worried about that because that's kind of always the way I walk into the room. And what really appealed to me, again, I've kind of been in the vanguard of indie publishing since its inception. And this whole Kickstarter thing is just a new facet of that, you know? And I really wanted to try that out and see what it was like. And this just seemed the perfect opportunity. Number one, because Kelley and I were in a position where we could do it on spec, as you said. And we wanted to line up the 4 books and work towards that, you know? And Kickstarter just seemed to be kind of the way to go. Now,
well, I think also I'm looking at that, you know, when they size you up career wise, I wanted something more than just, and I'm happy with it, but I wanted something more than Batman. I wanted something like this. I hoped for something like this, and then when it came, all the other questions of how to do it went away. It was like, I remember Matt wanted it a different size, so I had to go buy a paper cutter. I had to go buy the paper. I measured it. I mean, I'm doing all this physical stuff I never do. It was a total pleasure. I mean,
yeah, to specify there, it's going to be 8.5 by 11, so European album size, not standard American comic size.
And it works. It gave me more room, actually.
It's creepy eerie size.
Yeah. Yes, like creepy and eerie.
Let's talk about the realities of this commitment for you, Kelley. Like, how long did we spend drawing this first issue or the first book?
I want to say, if I were to just say in real time, about 5 or 6 months. You know,
that's another nice thing here is neither of us fret and worry about what we do.
No.
You know what I mean? We sit down and we produce. We know our aims. We know our goals. And, you know, I knew when I was working with Kelley, it wasn't going to be like 4 years later, I'm finally getting book 1 wrapped up. I was like, no, Kelley's going to sit down and draw this fucker.
Yeah.
And he did.
Yeah. And I because I was so enjoying the process of just, like I was saying earlier, production is everything. Things grow in that. If you spend too much time, it calcifies. So the emotion helped. You know, people were asking me, well, how did you come up with Dracula? How are you going to present Dracula? And I said, well, Matt wrote him so clearly in my head that I didn't have to sit and design him all day. It was like, oh, I see him.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
when
there's already an established template for Dracula to some degree. And
I'm talking about just how he carries himself.
Yes, right.
You know? I'm talking about the look in his eye, his angle of his head. To me, it's all almost method acting. So
right.
The best way I can put it. So I never worry about. I think a lot of people worry about the doodads on an outfit. I figured 15th century, I'll go look and see what they wore. That kind of hems you in. The real part to me of designing a character is those things. They're very intangible. So, but they're the things you know and you remember. And I think if there's something I did was Matt would do something and emphasize it, and I am able to get it to work in the picture in the panel without knowing what he's saying. You know he's saying something. You know it means something. You know there's a beat there that emphasizes it, and that's due to the fact that I believe I know who this guy is.
Kelley mentioned method acting there for his characterization. Bram Stoker's life as a writer was his side hustle, right? He was his main gig was he was the manager of a theater in London that had one star actor, a fellow named Henry Irving, and in fact, he based Dracula's stature, build, demeanor, appearance on Henry Irving. And Irving, even though he was an actor, so he was not an aristocrat, he still presented himself with a real snotty aristocratic bastard kind of air. So Kelley perfectly captured that in our Dracula.
Yeah, I loved that relationship. At least Irving read the whole novel out so they could secure copyright from anyone doing a play. I remember that was a kind thing he'd done. But yeah, he was a jerk.
And he didn't do a lot of kind things for Stoker.
No, he was a jerk to Stoker. Yeah, he was a real jerk. It's kind of like the film The Dresser. He was kind of like that.
Yeah.
So, but that's the stuff that influences my drawing. It going back to Dead Man and Batman. You act like you invent them, and it influenced how I did those. So I found success in that, and I stick to it. So when Matt would do it, write how he was or all this stuff, I never thought, oh, I got to sit here and draw pictures so I can show Matt. It was like, just hit the board. I already saw him. I already knew what it was. It'll work best when you just see him.
Yeah, and there was never any critiques I had were never about the drawing. The drawing was always perfect. It was always, as I said, I'm the storytelling bitch.
Mm-hmm.
So
it all works. And if you can't trust if you can't trust who you're working with, and your ego gets to the point to where that's the argument rather than the book, rather than the finished product. If I'm happy about anything, is people will really, I think, will really dig it. And it's going to be because it was just this perfect storm of creative people that got it, that just got it. We all wanted to see it this way. We didn't know what it was, but we knew we wanted to see it. So when it started happening, you get out of the way. I mean,
and part of what led to all of it was, I can't remember if I said this earlier when we were talking. In Stoker's novel, Dracula is this incredibly compelling and magnetic presence, and he's not on stage all that often. Yeah. Aside from the opening castle scene where Harker goes to his castle in Transylvania, once he gets to London, he's gone. He's not on stage very much. He's this shadowy presence that kind of infects the people around him. And when I was a kid and read the book, I was just like, I want more Dracula, So ever after that, I mean, I love so many Dracula movies, and I don't think any of them I never thought any of them were correct. So all of it was just like, well, someday I'm going to do my Dracula. And that turned out to be my and Kelley's Dracula. And boy, could not be happier with the synthesis that we came up with, that to my mind is the perfect complement to Stoker's original vision. And in keeping with that, we recently, when we were posting stuff on Twitter and Facebook about the campaign, I heard from Leslie Klinger, who is a famous author and considered one of the world's foremost Dracula scholars. He wrote the newest annotated Dracula, which is exhaustively annotated. He wrote an annotated Sherlock Holmes, Jekyll and Hyde, Frankenstein. The guy really knows his stuff. And so I sent him the book, like I sent you guys the book, and he sent us this glowing response, this glowing quote, a blurb that we can use. And I just thought, wow, whew. That guy's telling me we got it right. We got it right.
I think. Yeah. Well, Matt has a scholarly mind, so yes, he was going to the professor. I just draw comics, and that's why I'm happy. This is my period. With you guys reacting this way, I'm going, okay, I passed.
I like that shit too.
I think it's important to get on the record in this conversation that this is not an adaptation of Bram Stoker's novel.
Absolutely, it is not. This is not an adaptation of the novel into comics form. There are already a ton of those.
Yeah,
it's been adapted into comics over and over and over through the years.
Yeah, and we're not doing.
If you look on eBay and Amazon, you can find a ton of them.
Yeah,
it's not telling the stories around that story, the stories in the shadow of that story.
It's not like anything I've read, but it's all there. It's in canon, but it's never been told. That's what I hoped when the people would read the book, is they go, wow, I did, it's all there, but it's like, Matt doesn't do a thing like, I'm going to explain to you the folklore now. It just sort of happens. It's just sort of there, and it develops on its own. It's very organic. That's the best kind of storytelling.
Right.
Was there consideration when you guys went crowdfunding with this, consideration for putting it in front of an audience that maybe doesn't find it if it's just in comic shops or through, kind of traditional comics outlets? Was that something you thought about? Because this feels like a project that I think you could put it in the hands of people who have never read a comic, but love horror, love Dracula, love great art, and they would be in heaven. So was that something
yeah,
you
hopefully
thought about?
so. I mean, the when the direct sales market first arose and comic shops started coming into their own, it was a really great thing, because all of a sudden you're targeting a dedicated audience. Yeah, at the same time, over the years, much like record shops, it's become somewhat microcosmic. And certainly there's a huge portion of your buying audience that really likes that likes to go into that microcosm, into that cocoon, into just be enveloped in the world of comics. Other people don't necessarily want to go there, and they would much rather have access to this product some other way. So yeah, hopefully this is going to reach other people. We've enlisted the help of an advertising firm that's going to be advertising it online outside of the confines of what we're doing. And yes, like I said, hopefully this will appeal to horror fans, literature fans. We've done a ton of interviews with various horror websites, not comics websites. I mean, I keep saying arguably Dracula is the most famous literary character of all time. That's a huge leg up in getting it in the hands of readers.
Let's talk about some of this infrastructure behind the comic. Like when I mean, obviously the original goal on the Kickstarter was $666. Far exceeded that by
a little facetious there, I will admit.
Of course. But you guys got a long road ahead of you production wise. I can't imagine you're going to be stuffing envelopes and shipping these books off by hand. So what's that part of the procedure look like?
You enlist a fulfillment service. We have somebody that's doing that for us. Yeah, I don't want all those things stacked
Well,
up.
I want to make sure these things are packed properly so people get them in pristine condition.
Yeah, that too. Yeah,
and
as a result, we're dealing with people that know that.
We get greasy hands on everything and spill our coffee and whatnot. So you got to get someone who knows what they're doing.
Kelley, you got the toothbrush spatter, man. So we got to keep that far away from these pristine new books.
I got ink on my hands.
Splatter, and he uses his fingerprints a lot. If you look at that first page, the clouds are all fingerprint rendering. It's awesome.
Yeah. Don't tell him, man. I was going to use that to get into his iPhone.
Yeah, I can't commit a crime, man.
If for your various viewers that haven't looked at the Kickstarter page yet, so we have two different editions of the main book. One with a cover by Kelley, one with a cover by me. We have a signed and limited edition as well, and then we have a portfolio of so same size as the original art, 11 by 17. 7 plates from the interior artwork of the book that are all just real hot shit examples of Kelley's magnificent art. Each of them then has a caption, a very evocative caption at the bottom that's taken directly from my script on that page. So trying to not overload people with opportunities, not too much swag, but I think it's a pretty nice spread of product available.
So this video, go ahead.
As if it, if it grows, we'll do more. I mean, it's just how it is. If people show an interest, we'll do more.
This vid has gone live October 29th on Sunday is when we put this out to the public. So when does the Kickstarter kind of crowdfund end? And is there a time frame where people could start to expect to get their copies?
So it ends
3 weeks.
Yeah, November 21st or something like that. It says on the page.
Yeah, it's got 21 days to go.
But Ed, you mentioned their production and printing. Even though we're done with our end, the fact is, production runs slow and printing runs really slow these days. So it's about a year from now is when the book will find its way into people's hands. It actually ships from the printer, I want to say July?
June, I thought it was around June.
June or July, and then by the
Yeah.
time it gets to American shores and to the fulfillment service and then shipped out to everybody, all that shit just adds up
Yeah.
day after day, week after week. But
Well, I've said it before. We're like planes waiting to land. You all have to get in row because everybody's printing, and if I were not done with this, I would be going
worried,
nuts.
yeah.
Yeah, because
And the good news to that is, again, we're forging right ahead with
when 2 comes up, it'll be done.
Yeah.
That's just the way to do it. It has
Yeah.
to be done when you hit these things. It has to be finished.
Yeah, I mean that's a professional approach, man.
Yeah.
Especially with inflation and things, man. If you start
Yeah,
soliciting before you draw
Well,
the damn thing,
you can be forgiven a lot, but you can't be forgiven for wasting time.
right?
We're at the whims of the printing industry and everything else. But the stuff Matt and I control, we did it.
Yes.
And we didn't take a million years. We handled it. And you just got to go on people's good graces that they understand that, you know.
And additionally, this is just the approach I've always had throughout my professional life. I've sadly seen so many of my colleagues take money up front for gigs, and then they get lost in a black hole, and they've spent the money and they still have to do all that work. And I've just been adamant throughout my entire career, I do not invoice for something until it's done.
Mm-hmm.
And similarly, I've had dear friends that have run very successful Kickstarter campaigns, and boom, they're not done, and they get lost in that same black hole, and they generate an enormous amount of ill will.
Mm-hmm.
And we were just determined, nope, we are not going down that road. We're going to be done before we even mention
Well, I took the fact that when I'm working for Marvel or DC or whatever, I wasn't going to give them anything more to criticize me on. If I'm doing Weird Ears in the Cape, they can't say, and you're late, or you're
right.
all my professional cues were hit. So I would go, okay, it's on time, right? Well, I knew a lot of other guys aren't on time.
Yeah.
So you hit your professional marks, and then that way it cuts down any crap, because you can come right back and say, so what you're saying is if I give you time, you're going to criticize me, right? That's what I used to say to editors. If I'm on time, you're done criticizing. You're done with anything more. You can say it while I'm doing it, but not when it's done. I do not go back and take the same ground twice. And that was that. So in doing this, I can't change. I don't believe extra time makes something better. I think extra time ruins stuff. I think you need to. Matt knew that it needed, he was waiting for it. I have to respect Matt gave me a big, thick script, so I knew he was working on it. And he just doesn't, it's not just the time it took him to type it, he did enormous amounts of research. So you don't pay a guy back by then dicking around.
Have you guys put in more time selling this project than a typical book that you've done in the past?
Yeah, it sure feels like it right now, that's for sure.
The hardest part. The hardest part is this. It wasn't redoing the first page 3 times.
Yeah, we got you guys up at 10 a.m. Bright and early, man, to do some pitch.
I'm married to a teacher. I'm always up early.
Yep. My wife has her own business, so I'm always up early.
Yeah.
Appreciate the conversation, gentlemen. The audience out there, they have their marching orders pledged to this Kickstarter. The work is done. The work is done. This book has happened, and absolutely, it was a brilliant conversation.
And hey, you guys have gotten to read it.
Totally. And Kelley, it was super fun to chat with you in that tiny way. But we have to have you back on the show. Get a little bit broader.
Certainly. You guys just say when and where, and I'll do it.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much for joining us, and I'm sure.
Hey, thanks for having us on, guys.
You must have another interview at noon or 11 today.
5 o'clock.
Do we have another one? Is there another one today?
Yeah, 5 o'clock.
Cheers, guys.
Yeah, thanks, Matt and Kelley, and good
Thanks.
luck.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Kayfabers, like, follow, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Hit the bell so that we can notify you when new videos are available. We are a daily YouTube channel with more than 1,500 videos at your disposal. We might have talked about some of your favorites, so search for your favorite comics on the front page of the Kayfabe YouTube channel. Hit the magnifying glass, search for your favorites, check out those episodes. If we did not talk about your favorite comics, you have to let us know in the comments so that we can push your faves a little bit higher up on our to-read piles and make those episodes for you as soon as possible. The Patreon exists for the King Kayfabers to get all of the videos before anybody else does. It mitigates the kayfabe effect. The things that we talk about on this channel, things like the Escapo trade paperback, whatever, they become very expensive if you can even find them online at all. And it's always the King Kayfabers who get earliest dibs at those copies by getting the fully produced videos, plus the live stream recording sessions that we do while we produce the videos. Ultimately, though, the videos are brought to you by the books that we make. Before you is a good smattering of our bibliography, but we make new comics all the time. So, Jimmy, let the people know what you got.
I've been self-publishing lately. I have True Crime Funnies, a collection of 3 short nonfiction stories. 1986 zine is a celebration of the greatest year in comics history, 1986, looking at everything from Dark Knight to Mouse to Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and their many ripoffs. And the BW zine, looking at the black and white explosion, self-publishing, and small press books of the 1980s. These are all available right now on my website, jimrugg.com. Coming up in November, I will have a new volume of Street Angel. Street Angel Princess of Poverty will be out from Image Comics at the end of November. You can pre-order or reserve that one now. It is a companion piece to Street Angel, Deadliest Girl Alive, also available from Image Comics. Together, these 2 books will collect all of my Street Angel comics that I have created so far. And finally, Hulk Grand Design, my contribution to the Grand Design stories, one of the books I'm most proud of making. This thing is out of print at the distro level, which means if it's at your comic shop, scoop it up, because it is going to disappear and be hard to replace. Prices are already going up online for these, so if you haven't added Hulk Grand Design to your collection yet, do that now.
The Hip Hop Family Tree Omnibus is out there in full effect. Thank you guys so much for supporting it if you did. And if you have not yet, right at this moment at least, there's some steep discounts online that you could find if you don't have a good comic shop in town. 504 pages with about 140 plus pages of additional material. It's going to serve all customers. The people who read Hip Hop Family Tree in the past, you're getting a lot more material to chew on. And if you've never seen Hip Hop Family Tree before, like, now is the time. Or generating new readership with this latest Hip Hop Family Tree Omnibus. Let's sell it out before 2023 closes out the calendar year. I think that's a noble goal, and we're more than 75% of the way toward that goal. Not the only holiday piece I'm having come out in 2023. There's going to be an X-Men Grand Design Trilogy trade paperback coming to you. It's going to include all of my X-Men Grand Design works in one handy package. It's going to be the size of a comic. It's going to be smaller than the Hip Hop Family Tree size big books, but that is coming to you in November. Red Room has been the focus for the past couple of years. There are 2 trade paperbacks out right now, the Antisocial Network and Trigger Warnings. Third's going to come to you in January. It's called Crypto Killers. And right now I am serializing my daily strip exclusively to my Patreon. It's called Switchblade Shorties. It's going to be coming out January 1st, 2024. But you could get a leg up and check out those comics before they see the light of day to Gen Pop. Plus, I do streams every now and then here on the Kayfabe channel, producing new comic pages and new strips for that series. So thank you guys who have been supporting that. Let's keep that rocking. The books are the absolute most important part of keeping Cartoonist Kayfabe sustainable to the point where Jimmy and I could collaborate and put these videos together. There are, however, some other ways to support the channel. Jimmy, let the people know.
Subscribe to the Cartoonist Kayfabe newsletter at the links below this video. You can also find Cartoonist Kayfabe t-shirts, merchandise, hats, stickers, and more at our spread shop. That link is also under this video.
All good ways to support the channel. Give them some marching orders, Jimmy, and we'll be on our way.
Read more comics.